Alrighty, we are ready to call to order the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting for Tuesday, September 19th, 2023. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Rendelman.
Here.
Mr. Freeze.
Here.
Ms. Wadsworth.
Here.
Mr. McEnroth.
Here.
Mr. Simmons.
Here.
Mr. Morgan.
Here.
Ms. Hernandez.
Here.
Ms. Donovan.
All right, we got a full house. I love it. Looking first thing is an approval of the minutes. We've got two different meetings, May 16th and June 20th. Did anybody have any changes or amendments to those, or are we hearing a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes for both meetings.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are approved. And adoption of the agenda. Does anybody have anything to add, subtract, change for our new business and discussion items for today? All right, in that case, let's move on to public comments.
All right, we have our guest here today.
Not quick.
Who would just expect?
If you come up there, you probably get the mics working for you. And
And you
then,
can sit down too. You don't stand.
we're not formal.
All right. My name is Carly Brownstein. My family and I live at 9th and Washington, just down the road, so I was able to walk here this evening, which was lovely. We relocated from Portland about a year ago, sold our business of a decade, totally got out of the city, and we're really excited about being part of the Oregon City community. Bought a beautiful but very house that really needed some work on 9th and Washington, and we've been lovingly restoring it for the last year. We have a 2-year-old daughter who enjoys all of the amenities that Oregon City has to offer, and we're absolutely loving living here. Exactly what we had hoped, with one small exception, which is the pedestrian crosswalk at 9th and Washington. I'm not sure if your colleague Ben had an opportunity to share some of the feedback that we gathered as neighbors, but we're looking for some oversight at that pedestrian crosswalk. It's quite dangerous. We have personally had numerous encounters with cars that have, nearly struck one of us. And frankly, at this point, with our daughter being as young as she is, we feel very unsafe leaving our home and crossing the street, which is quite sad, to be honest. One of the things that we love about where we live specifically is that we're still in the mix. We have quick access to the pool, the library. We're heavily involved in our local community in terms of our daughter's activities. But it's become a daily frustration where we attempt to cross the crosswalk there at 9th and Washington, and we're afraid to. That many of you probably know that there's already a large speeding lighting sign when you go down, which is great to tell us just how quickly people are speeding and are totally disregarding the law. And there's also just a complete lack of enforcement in terms of law enforcement in the area. Obviously, that's a separate subject. I'm well aware of the constraints that they have in terms of their manpower and the ability to actually patrol the area. But we would really like to see improvements at the crosswalk specifically, to have additional mitigation measures in place for safety, similar to those that were installed at the crosswalk on 12th and Washington, that have proven to be effective in providing additional safety for pedestrians, and the crosswalk on 7th. So we have been gathering support. I wasn't really aware, only being here a short time, whether or not we would have additional community support, whether or not our neighbors felt similarly. And it didn't take me very long in speaking with many of them to to realize that they've been actually raising concern about this crosswalk for many years, about the speeding on Washington, about the risk. And I think it goes deeper than, just how safe do we feel. It's the right to quiet enjoyment. It is, a crosswalk that's pretty vital. There are 3-4 churches within one block. We have elderly individuals crossing, many families with young children. And I firmly believe at this point, it's really not a matter of if there's an accident, it's when. And unfortunately, that will likely be either our elderly or our very young population. Tragic regardless of who it is. But standing on my front porch, watching day after day, individuals waiting at the crosswalk, sometimes minutes to cross. Sometimes, people are literally slowing down as people are jumping out of the way in the middle of the crosswalk. And at that point, I realized we've got to do something about it. And I guess that's me. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you very much for listening and taking the attention. I had the opportunity to speak with Ben at the last meeting and Raymond as well, who advised that the next step or the responsible step would be to meet with you all here. And so that's what I'm doing. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for coming and for all your insight. So,
Chair,
oh yeah.
I do have a question mostly for clarity. And it's, to me, from your presentation, it's not clear which street you want to have the signs on and crosswalk. On Washington or 9th?
I hear you. Okay, thank you very much. It's on Washington.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was confused about which side of Washington. Ideally both. There would be an opportunity to press for the pedestrian crossing at both sides, but yes, on Washington Street.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Vance? Did we salvage the one that was down at 12th before the signal went in?
Excuse me. I did notice, I did a drive-by before I came to the meeting this evening, and there is no yellow paint prior to the corners. So, and I'm thinking especially during church services and that, those cars could park really close up to the corner, which makes it difficult for pedestrians. So maybe, I know it's not a solution, but it might help with safety if we had some yellow paint
Right,
to prevent
that's
cars
similar,
from parking right up to the corner.
right, I agree, and that is can be an effective tool to use. That's similar to what we did on Berta at Gaffney for that situation, eliminating a couple of spots to increase that sight distance from the ped to the motorist. So absolutely something we can consider.
Especially with the dip in the road there, the sight distance is already a problem. And
Yeah.
little history is the mayor had asked me to speak at the neighborhood association. So about a week ago, Raymond and I both were attending, had a good time chatting with the residents and listening to the different impacts and aspects of their concerns there. So we haven't had a time to talk about it since that meeting because this was the next opportunity. So I appreciate you showing up, bringing it to the table. So now we can have a very good discussion about it and talk to staff and find out the next steps and what we can do, what's available, short-term and long-term. So does anybody else have any additional questions?
May I?
Oh,
So
yes,
I'm sorry,
absolutely.
I'm not aware of the formalities and the format of this, but I just wanted to speak to that directly. I hope that it looks like you have my letter directly up there.
Yep.
So that's number 4 on one of the reasons that are on the culmination of reasons, really, that it is such a hazardous intersection, really, or crosswalk. It's one of the many things that I think can be done to improve. I am not aware that, these types of things take a long time. They take someone willing to commit the time to doing those things. So even incremental steps forward to creating a safer space is progress. So just, that would certainly be appreciated. I've done quite a bit of research in the meantime, and, happy to share what I've found and the resources that are available. You mentioned grants the last meeting. I've done some research into that. So whatever I can do to be helpful in this way, I've essentially committed to my neighbors and to our neighborhood that, I would continue to pursue this until we figured out something that would be long-term in terms of safety for the neighborhood. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, did you have another question
Yes,
for her?
Maureen, so are we considering just a sign with a lighted thing to control it? Or are we talking about having lights running across the current sidewalk or the current crosswalk right now? Because looking on Google Maps, it's pretty broad white striping on there. So would we look at maybe just putting one of the lighted signs and on each side of it where it says stop or yield, whatever, versus the digging construction of putting the lights flashing on the crosswalk? Maybe see if that would be a first coming.
So we knew the topic was coming. We haven't really developed a list of solutions yet. We know there's opportunities there just from having been there ourselves a fair amount. There is a challenge with the church and their desire for parking as well, but I think, I didn't go to the last neighborhood meeting there, but I was at one before that. And the minister of the church actually was asking about the same thing as what kind of improvements could be done there. So same recommendation was, you should come to a TAC meeting, and he didn't make that, but you have, so maybe he's coming. Yeah.
Well, I think my plan was to get it on the top, on the agenda. Obviously, she's here to talk about it, and I think we can kind of roll into new business discussion, which is this again. And my question to staff is what resources are available, like, as Chris was mentioning with painting the sidewalks, what incremental steps can we take initially? And then what things can we plan for in the future and try to find budgeting for, whether it be through grants, whether it be if we've got some signage that we can use temporarily that doesn't require us, digging up the sidewalks, are there some general ideas that we might have as could be future solutions?
Yeah, and to me, I think it's like finding out expectations without drawing a conclusion tonight.
Right.
I didn't want to do that because I wanted to hear and I wanted to have the discussion. So rather than just bring you a bunch of solutions that we thought would be, appropriate, we kind of figured we'd hear it tonight.
Okay.
We'd like to come back after, well, the other thing is we haven't really had a chance to look at the traffic count numbers and try to figure out, what the accident history is there. And, but for me, one of the big things in this setting expectations is what we have at 12th and Washington is a signalized intersection now, right? And I'm not sure that's what the neighborhood's asking for there, but I want to confirm that.
Can you clarify signalized?
It has, at 12th and Washington, there's basically a vehicle signal, as well as pedestrian heads and push buttons and all the kind of things that go along with a traffic signal stop, right? So that would be, that was nearly $1 million to build that intersection. So that's one question I had for tonight, or was hoping to get kind of confirmation of. There's definitely no warrant for a signal at that location. If you remember, some of you were on the TAC then. Most of you weren't, but that took years to get to that particular location, just because it really never fully met signal warrants. We got there with a couple of traffic accidents that happened at that intersection. That's what bumped that to a decision-making point where we could actually get a signalized intersection done there. But at 9th and Washington, we definitely don't see that kind of cross traffic there, so we would never be able to justify, because of signal warrants, a signalized intersection. And
I don't, to address that specifically, we're certainly not asking that. I don't know what that would do to the flow of traffic. I don't know. In light of cars outside of So, just to clarify, the request really is for the pushable pedestrian crosswalk that's visible from both sides that slows traffic to allow pedestrians to cross safely.
So is the ones that we've used up by the grocery outlet and the ones that we've used on Holcomb, I'm obviously very familiar with that.
Right.
Is that the standardized version that goes in a circumstance if we were to approve it here and have funding for it? Or are there a variety of different lesser costs, lesser obtrusive versions of the same thing that could go in?
Right, and I think, you've outlined some good ideas here in terms of progression of that. So always the first ask is for what we call a rapid flashing beacon. That's always the ask, right? We've had it asked for many locations close to school districts or school buildings as well. So we kind of hear that first from folks who are concerned about elderly and children, right? That's typically the pedestrian of most concern. So we're kind of used to hearing that, and we know that there's a lot of things that can be done, even before you get to that point. And that is there is a striped crosswalk at that intersection that crosses. It's got the reflective pavement markings there and some signage. Can we do more? We can. One of the things about rapid flashing beacons that I'll just acknowledge is we've got a transportation system plan. Most of you are familiar with at least the name of that document that went through a fair amount of public involvement. And out of that, I don't know, I think we got 14 or 15 different rapid flashing beacon locations identified on that plan. We haven't installed all of those around town because they're expensive, right? And so, because just the rapid flashing, the 3 that we put in on Holcomb, I think my recollect of that contract was it was just under $500,000 for the 3 that we did on Holcomb Boulevard.
Is that because of also some of the sidewalk work that had to be done?
Right, which we would, while there's sidewalks there, that section of Washington from 12th to 7th has never had boulevard improvements like what you see in some of the other locations, right? So the good news is that section of Washington, it's actually in the list of projects that I gave you that were Nexus projects for some of this tolling revenue, should we ever see any of that. Because we do want to encourage more pedestrian activity along Washington Street, right? So trying to make those sidewalks a little more ADA accessible, working on things like crossings that might be safer. Washington's a challenging street because of its grades, right? And it comes up very steep and then flattens out, and it's Henry's fault. I think he designed it that way back in the day.
Actually, there's a little bowl between 9th Street and 7th Street. There used to be a lake there when it rained really hard.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, it's a challenge. Geometry-wise, it's challenging. And then, I can't really defend the traffic and the way the traffic uses Washington. I hear it pretty regularly because Denise, our mayor, is pretty adamant about reminding me about the traffic problems up there and the volume of traffic and the speed at which they go up and down. You're right. So we at one point in time, we had a rapid flashing beacon at 12th, and we replaced that with the signal. And we put that speed zone sign in, and the neighborhood actually paid for part of that speed zone sign to get that speed zone sign put in place. So that's good feedback, but it's not effective with everyone. It is effective with some people, but not effective with anyone. Just like the one on 5th, right? Those speed feedback signs remind the good drivers that often pay attention to them, but there's a lot that just blow by it and don't even see it anymore. That's the problem with sign pollution or too many crosswalks, putting stop signs where they don't belong. All those kinds of things kind of add to the problem. So we haven't fully dove into this particular question, but I think the rapid flashing beacons they're not inexpensive solutions. They're over $100,000. We are kind of committed to taking off those that are on the list first, right? The other thing I want to say about a lot of the things that we hear in our transportation system planning, we're going to redo that in a couple of years. I think, Henry, Tim, I think you missed you weren't on the committee the last time we did a transportation system plan update. But in a couple of years, we're going to do that again. And usually what comes out of that is this wish list from the community about all the things that they want. And there's a disconnect between what we can afford and what we want. And the one thing that I hope that occurs this time around with the transportation system plan is we encourage creative thinking and, all the universe of ideas that the community likes to provide. But at some point, we have to come back to the fact that right now we have a TSP that's unaffordable. And we've got a lot of projects like that. And I think, what's most important to the community? Is it driving solutions? Is it walking solutions? That's going to help us kind of do a better job of kind of meeting these requests. Do we focus only on those areas that have a history of safety problems, or do we look for those areas that could be a future safety problem? So we should come back and give you a little more data based on traffic accidents and what other things we could do. I don't know if this is only a daytime problem. Is it a nighttime problem? So is there good street lighting there? I don't know that we know that, but we want to come back with that. I did drive through there, but the striping is probably in good shape.
It's in good shape,
Okay.
and the signs are in good shape, but we only have the signs at the crosswalk. So there's
Okay.
no pre-warning signs.
That's what I was going to say is.
So we could do pre-warning
If we did a
signage.
pre-warning sign, and then with a posted speed limit below that pre-warning sign, start that's a low-cost effort. Then we can add this to the list of the other 14 to look at, to do the study. But that would probably maybe get some awareness to people to pay attention to their speed and because that's an unusual crosswalk to have that big of stripes on it. So it's a busy sidewalk, or a crosswalk. So if maybe we can get some pre-warning signs, I don't know what the distance requirement is on that, and post them farther on each end with the reminding everybody, by the way, the speed limit is, and maybe then that will start reducing when somebody stands there wanting to cross, it'll be like they saw something.
Yeah.
You could always put one of those photo radar little sandwich signs there. That will definitely get people to slow down. And it doesn't have to be
I would take that as well. There is one pedestrian warning sign regarding the crosswalk, and it's just on, it's in front of the yellow house, right as you come up. What is the address on
So
that?
we will,
Coming up the hill.
Yeah, that was installed 6 months ago.
so we'll have to look at the other side then.
But I definitely think, making sure when somebody's standing on the curb that they don't have the car sight distance issue.
Right.
We should look at that.
Yep.
If it's a nighttime problem too, do we have good illumination? Or do we need pre-signage? Those are things that happen quick for us because we do those. We've got an annual budget to do signage, things like that. We're not big on painting curbs. And you want to share why maybe we don't do a lot of curb painting?
Yeah, so curb painting is effective, as are no parking signs. Typically, we like to sign areas because the curbs are actually pretty high maintenance, believe it or not. People rub up against them, wear the paint off, the paint gets old, and typically a street sign, if nobody hits it or damages it, it can be there for years and years and years, and we don't have to touch it. So depending on the situation, we may do yellow curb, we may do signage, or both. And in this situation, we'll just go out there and see what is going to work the best. We would probably try signage first. And if it's properly signed, and we do work very closely with Oregon City Police Department to make sure that where we put our no parking signs is enforceable. And through that communication, we usually hit the mark on that. So again, there's a little flexibility there in what treatment we do. Again, sometimes we do both signage and curb paint. With the signage, it becomes apparent pretty quickly if people are going to abide by it. You know, and I was sitting here thinking, and we hadn't discussed this. So we mentioned speeds, right? And even though we have the radar sign that tells everybody their speeds, it's not taking pictures or issuing tickets. We have what we call a covert radar box. It's actually owned by the police department. My staff puts it up, and it records data. It also does not issue tickets or anything, but it records data. And the nice thing is it's basically hidden. People don't notice it. So we get a very accurate representation of really what the speeds are. And that's something that I'll work with our transportation manager to see if we can get up here in the next couple weeks, get a week's worth of data. That can be very helpful in this discussion. And also, a question for you, Carly. Have you reached out to the police department at all for enforcement?
Oh,
Okay.
have I?
And that's fine. I'm happy to do that. Yeah. And just let them know we're having this conversation. And, you know, if and when they can, you know, to do some more enforcement on Washington.
Yeah, they've been responsive, wonderful. I, again, reiterate that I'm aware of the constraints that they're currently under. Any
Right.
additional patrol that we can get in the area would be greatly appreciated.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah.
Well, again, those are a couple things I'm happy to do. And I think it's safe to say that with this good conversation we're having about this evening, you know, we did talk about it briefly today and kind of brainstormed a little bit. As John mentioned, we're not ready to, we wanted to hear you first, right? And get some clarification. You know, I think come the October meeting, I think we can have a pretty comprehensive report of what we can do. You never know, we might even do something between now and then and surprise everybody. But but again, in October, we should be able to line out what we can do in the short term, what are some midterm and long-term goals for that intersection. You know, it'll be up to John and his engineering staff to do the analysis to see, you know, is a RRFB warranted there? If not, how do we get it there? If it's never going to get there, what are our alternatives, right? So
That's very fair.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
we're happy to do it.
Can I ask you a clarification question just in terms of overall budgeting for an installation like that? Separate from install, which has its own costs, what does a unit cost?
Well, that's usually on the low side. So often the research is, oh, I looked them up online and they're, you know, $15,000 or, you know, I haven't looked lately. Maybe we'll get an updated number.
Between 15 and 20.
So we'll get an updated number, but we've also, so we utilize Clackamas County to do our signal maintenance, and that includes these rapid flashing beacons. So they're not interested in the solar option, and so it's a, you know, you got to get a meter base, electric meter base. We do have to deal with the ADA ramps in that location because there's on-street parking and because there's probably this idea of pushing folks away from the corner. I think in the future there will be what we call curb extensions that kind of make that pedestrian zone even where they have to be out in the street even narrower, right? So, but anyway, there's just all that concrete and, you know, sometimes there's drainage that work associated with that. And that's why they do get very, very expensive after you know, it's not just about purchasing the unit.
Are the curb extensions part of the current TSP plan?
No, not specifically. There's nothing specific about that intersection that is in the TSP. But we take those, when we do boulevard projects, kind of like what we did up and down 7th Street or other sections of Washington, Main Street, we're putting in curb extensions right now. We look at all those opportunities to try to, again, make those areas more pedestrian friendly. So right now, 13th, I think 12th, you know, we're tearing up those intersections right now to put curb extensions in.
Mm-hmm.
I know one topic that came up was the speed bump program that we had at the meeting. So I guess that was transitioning into, we don't have a program for situations like this. Is there potential for a program down the line that if a neighborhood requested a rapid flashing beacon and we're willing to participate, you know, the neighborhood was willing to participate in the cost, is that another program that we could put together to speed the process for a neighborhood that's, you know, looking for it, but hasn't necessarily got on the TSP yet?
Well, so there's not a program like that, but I would say the McLaughlin neighborhood is our largest neighborhood and our most well-attended and kind of organized. Oh, don't tell the other neighborhoods that, but it's pretty well-organized. They did pull together the fund. I don't remember the dollar amount, but I remember I think they paid for at least half, maybe more. I can't quite remember for that speed sign. And, you know, that didn't require a program, that just required a commitment, and they were able to come up with that. Rapid flashing beacon, again, is more difficult because we actually typically hire a design firm to do the design work on that, make sure it's placed properly, make sure, you know, it's specified properly, and then we would have to look at all the ADA ramps, so looking at the grades across there. That intersection does need work, but a rapid flashing beacon would trigger that work as opposed to just doing some signage work that wouldn't trigger that kind of.
Okay. Well, thank you. If I could leave you with one tiny tidbit. So I'm a fourth generation Oregonian. My husband is also fourth generation Oregonian. We don't plan on leaving anytime soon. I grew up in a small town in Ashland, very similar to Oregon City. Our section is really the face of the McLaughlin neighborhood and kind of the entryway, the gateway for what you can expect to see in the rest of Oregon City. The vast majority of individuals that live directly near me are elderly, 70 plus. What happens when these individuals pass, sell? Do we want young families to come in and continue to revitalize and to keep these large, expensive maintenance homes up? They're historically marked. It's a section that needs additional attention. And so I guess my question, or what I would leave you with is, who do you want to take over these homes next? What is the next generation gonna expect? And are they going to want to live there? And I think it's a vital, vital part of Oregon City. And so I appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
We do have, the next topic is the next meeting, right? Because this topic, as well as the speed limit topic, we're hoping to cover in October. But Dana and I are out our regular meeting date, so we do need to set a meeting date, and I want to make sure you stick around long enough to figure that.
I'll just sit right back here.
Okay, yeah.
No, you got to stay in the hot seat.
All right, let's continue on with our discussion items.
Yeah, we're moving into the Public Works report, and as John said, we're going to discuss the October meeting. These are the two dates that we were able to find that worked on our side. Do they work for all of you? I've been able to hold this conference room for those dates too. So if they work, fantastic. If not, we'll talk more.
No conflicts?
And,
I don't have any conflicts. It seems like the latter one would give staff more time to prepare for any of the issues.
We're just taking head counts. I would be unable on the 24th. I would be more likely on the 12th.
I'm good any old time.
you good on what?
I'm unable on the 12th.
My first
From
preference.
Ben and Julie, we need you to step out here. We're gonna arm wrestle.
She wins.
My preference would be the 24th first and then the 12th, just because Thursdays are always meeting days for me for public service stuff.
What you wish for, that
I
means
know.
you or Henry's gonna have to run it if I'm not there.
I could probably do soon.
The 24th, but we'll be out of town on the 12th, but she could do Zoom on the 12th.
Ben was gonna be out on the 20th.
On previous occasions, when you've taken this short vacation to Seaside to go see the latest stuff on excavation and whatnot, we've skipped that meeting.
I know, we didn't want to skip it. Vance probably would have been willing to skip it. I think Dana will. I'm a little bit, this speed limit, setting speed limits in Oregon City is a hot topic, and I know our commission's interested in. I didn't want to bump it another month to cancel, so I was pressing pretty hard to figure out if we could do it another time. And I like the extra time that the 24th provides for us, to be honest with you, because it is a little bit, although I'll be at the APWA conference that week before, so I won't be working on those topics during that time either, but, so we probably have to be ready even before the conference, because we gotta get the packet out, but yeah, just thinking about trying to get a packet out for the 12th, it's gonna be a little bit of a challenge, so, so, if, my preference would also be the 24th.
I do.
I'll try to zoom in if I can. If I'm the only one that's got a conflict, I'll see if I can get
Okay.
someplace with internet.
Your trusty vice chair is always available.
All right,
So that's helpful, thank you.
So 24th it is that what I'm hearing?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
And so we'll bring back a little more information for that meeting. And I don't know, do you have a neighborhood meeting between now and then? Carly, do you have a neighborhood meeting between now and then, do you know?
We do, but it hasn't been announced yet.
Okay, yeah, I think we don't need a room full of, cheerleaders necessarily for it. So it's not for that, I was just wanting to make sure that, if you can update them on kind of what our intention is, that'd be great. Because we're not planning, our plan was to go to one meeting a year for each neighborhood, kind of, right?
Yeah, and I was hoping that others could check in on the other neighborhood associations and everything, and depending on the date, I mean, I'm happy to check in again
Okay,
if available.
Has your neighborhood been visited by one of us?
Yes, Ben was there.
Okay.
Just did it.
and I heard he did a good job, I don't know,
Good job. Yeah, and Raymond as well.
Raymond was there too?
I had my sidekick with me.
Good.
We appreciate you folks doing that. Thank you.
Take one for the team. Okay, thanks for the details. And the next slide, I think, is just some signage that we kind of wanted to acknowledge in a public way, because people struggle with this particular travel movement. So does this location look familiar to
I
all
was
of
just
you?
commenting on this tonight getting here. Why can't we turn left and have to go back the alley and wind our way around?
Because it'll back up that bridge.
Yeah, the idea is, and that's part of the challenge is when it looks like this and there's no traffic there, that's a typical movement. But during, we don't typically post signage like that for just peak hour. And what the problem is that, it backs up the bridge, people waiting and waiting and waiting for the through traffic to come through.
I'll say that the one that you had up on the right, you can almost see the pillar right there that blocks it when you're coming down. Putting the one on the left, the day you put it up, I wasn't even aware it was going up, and boom, it was obvious.
Right.
So much better visual.
Good.
So, and, our staff did it, and I think they did a great job with it, but, now it's not only the visual that says no left with the red cross through it, but the words are there now, so you can either take the time to read it or pay attention to the visual, but, we've got that, and then, ODOT did the arrow legend striping on the pavement, at least on the bridge side. I don't know if we did the stuff on the other side, but, it's really this movement that had gotten some more signage and more striping. So, anyway, the main message is it is illegal to take a left onto Main Street as you come off the bridge. Now that it's much better signed and marked, police, to the degree they can enforce, are committed to enforcing that. So we want the general traveling public to know that too, since we had the opportunity. So That's all we had for that one.
Yeah. From my perspective, the elevator is your problem because when you come down the bridge, you're looking at the traffic signals, one on each side of the elevator. Your turn sign on that arm is smack on the shaft of the elevator. You've got white on white. I don't think anybody actually sees those signs because there's so much clutter at that intersection.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, maybe it should be yellow.
We could put a yellow border around the sign.
Yeah.
The white background with the black is, that's how we have to do the sign itself.
Yeah.
But we could look into putting a yellow border, not around, I wouldn't do it around all of them, but I would consider having a conversation about doing a border around the sign that Henry pointed out that does sort of blend into the elevator shaft. That could be helpful. Or a black border also.
But I think you could put a blockade up there and people wouldn't see it just because that's a very cluttered intersection.
Well, the other reason why it becomes cluttered is that bridge is not wide enough for two cars to drive down it, especially if you're driving a full-size pickup or an SUV. You hope your mirrors are not going to slap somebody on the way down there. So you're sitting there focusing on driving down there and not hitting the curb, which extends way out there, and then you got the traffic light up there. So there's a lot of maneuvering going on, especially probably for new drivers, new teen drivers are probably challenging it. But I think if you did change that one sign in the center of the light standard to yellow, that would definitely call. I've never even noticed that with that white there.
I don't know what the picture would look like from the driver's perspective. We're kind of standing on the sidewalk here, so.
Well, I can go
Maybe a
home
little different.
and give you a snapshot of my drive cam because I just drove right through there tonight to get to this meeting. And I commented to my wife, when are we going to change this so we can make a left? Because this is ridiculous. We have to go all the way down and around the back. And she goes, if I didn't know you knew how to get there, I would have never known how to get there.
Now, are you on the citizen comment? Board member.
Both.
All right. Okay, well, that actually got a lot more discussion than I was anticipating there.
Careful what you put up.
Let's see, what's this one? New crosswalk at Lynn and Pearl. So this one came from
Dee Dee Dahlstrom.
Dee Dee came to if you remember, Dee Dee Doldrum came to a Transportation Advisory Committee meeting, and there was a lot in that meeting that she talked about, which included speed of Lynn Avenue and, safety along Lynn Avenue. But one of the main points that she made that she followed up with me on later, because it fell off the plate, was the fact that this is a bus stop for students. And it's along Lynn Avenue, which has got its own set of geometric curves and things that kind of make it challenging. So just kind of paying attention to that kind of report, we looked at that and we went ahead and moved forward with this without bringing it to the TAC. We thought it was warranted and it was easily signed, so we now have a striped pedestrian crosswalk there with signage. So those kinds of things again, I think sometimes you can get too much of that, right? So picking the key locations, I think that's why there's one at 9th and Washington striped as well. But you don't see them everywhere on Lynn Avenue or everywhere on Fifth Avenue.
It's a very busy bus stop.
Yep.
So all the kids up on the hill, let alone up on Pearl, catch the bus right there on the corner, so.
Yeah, Dee Dee shared some pictures with us. She had stopped while the bus was offloading, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of kids that use
I'm there every afternoon, and you'd be surprised the people that will those lights are going and cars just blow right through. It's very scary. So I'm sure that's very much appreciated for the people that live up on Pearl.
Probably wouldn't have anything to do with the people coming down the hill at about 10, 12 over.
Might.
So this next slide just kind of represents, I shared late today with Audrey, who then forwarded on to you folks. So no expectations here that you've looked at any of that information, but there's 4 documents in there that I thought were good information for the Transportation Advisory Committee, and they're with regard to some of the work that we've been, as a collective with Clackamas County staff, other agency staff in the county, so all the other cities, have been working on a variety of initiatives as they relate to I-205 tolling. And as you know, most of the jurisdictions in the city have kind of taken a position that's contrary to where ODOT seems to be going with tolling right now. So there's a letter from the chair and co-chair of the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, who has spent a lot of time on tolling. And so just providing that, which is really a cover letter to what we call a Nexus project list. So this letter is combined with the project list, of which the county submitted on behalf of all the jurisdictions. This is just a few columns of the information that's in this list, and it's only Oregon City's projects. So most of those came out of our transportation system plan and the regional transportation plan. So they're long-standing projects, most of them. Again, text is very small, not the expectation that you could read it here, but that is information that wasn't in your packet, but you now have in an email form. So feel free to take a look at that. And my recollection is, so we've got a project name that we've given it, and we've got kind of a location from and to, if it's a boulevard, the type of project that it is, whether it's a roadway project or an active transportation project. And then kind of a short description of what it was. If it's included in our regional transportation plan, then we provided that number, project number for them. And then I just added, there's a couple of columns that they asked, will the project be ready for construction in any short time period or not? And I think the first one was within 5 years, and the next one's within 5 to 10 years. So all this information plus several other columns that you don't have in front of you were things that staff put together in response to an ODOT request for, okay, if the city were to get wanted Nexus projects that were thought to be beneficial if tolling went in, and we saw diversion on our streets because of some of the tolling on 205, then this is a run at those projects. And there's some some of those projects are more like programs, so downtown, pedestrian improvements downtown. And then towards the end of the list, there's some projects that don't have an RTP number. They're projects that we kind of came up with in either some of our conversations with ODOT that we thought might have some merit and some warrants, and some projects that came up that we just thought might make sense to add. And so just look at the list later. Don't worry about it right now. It's just information that's in your packet. And I thought it would be good for you to know that is going on. And then there's a letter from an attorney by the name of Daniel Mulville, and he's the county counsel on this on the overall effort by the county, but by all the jurisdictions that participated. Kind of a culmination of response letter with regard to the I-205 EA and the environmental assessment work that we did. So we put a lot of work into providing ODOT with our comments and concerns about that whole process. And it's been quiet, right? They haven't really said much other than they've definitely made it loud and clear that the only thing they're gonna do is the first phase, which is the bridge phase of the I-205 project. So the additional lane along 205 between Stafford Road and really Highway 213, that's no longer on their plan. But yet they, they're still gonna move forward with widening the bridge. They're still moving forward with building the tolling gantry on the bridge. And their intention is, even though the tolling has been delayed for a couple of years, their intention is to move forward with tolling. So that doesn't really help our diversion problem in Oregon City and some of the traffic impacts that we're gonna see from those folks who don't wanna pay the toll and would rather find an alternate route through town. So anyway, a lot of effort went into that. It's been pretty quiet on the ODOT front with response to any of those. So this letter is pretty strongly written, and it was copied to a pretty important list of elected representatives, people on, House of Representatives, U.S. Senators, Senate Majority Leader, just, so you'll see that in that letter as well. And then the last document is, isn't the latest version of it, but it's the latest version I had, which is this joint values on the proposed regional congested pricing and toll projects within the metro area. So the Clackamas C4 has, which is made up, for those of you that don't know, elected officials from all the cities and districts. It's a pretty large group, but they meet monthly, and they talk about transportation and a lot of things with regard to housing. But anyway, they decided that this was important enough that they wanted to kind of express some values. If tolling is going to come, this is what we want it to do. So I think the red line version is close enough to what they're going to end up with, and it's got some red lines through it, and some of the text that they're going to delete, and some that they're going to add. So wanted to add that too. The idea was this was going to be included with all the, or no, this one wasn't. This one's not. There's one more letter that I think the C4 is working on that's got all our logos on it, but this is just a value statement. And doesn't mean that they're for tolling. It just means that if we're gonna get to a place where ODOT's gonna force tolling, then they want to make sure it's done in a way that provides the best benefit to the region, to Clackamas County. So I think that's more homework for you than, unless you guys had a chance to actually look through it and read it and have comments, then great. But I know that came out very, very late, and I apologize for that. But Audrey's been harping me for it for a couple days, and I just got around to getting it to her today.
Just to clarify, so the list of projects that we just looked at, that's what we'd be looking at, I guess,
Microphone.
in terms of oh, sorry. Is that what we're saying would mitigate if there's diversion then because of the tolling? Is that ODOT's way of compensating the city? Is that, I guess, in other words?
Yeah, Oregon City has a problem in that there's not a lot of projects that mitigate anything because we've got nowhere to go, right? There's no way to expand 99E through Oregon City. There's no way to expand Main Street through Oregon City or any of our little side streets. So the term, these are what they're now calling nexus projects,
right.
because so not much difference really I just think ODOT is finding a slight difference there. I think the region in our transportation world are finding a little difference there, but these are projects that would make it better for Oregon City, because it would make it for Washington Street, for instance,
Right.
if there was funding that was gonna come out of tolling that we could use for nexus projects, maybe Washington Street's one of those, because if we make Washington Street safer, better for pedestrians, maybe they're less likely to drive their car down there and they might walk down there, or they might walk down, or bike down there, right? That doesn't mean trying to get to Tigard or Beaverton from Oregon City. That's not going to help that commuter very much. And that's, I think that's our biggest problem, is there aren't projects that solve that mitigate
Gotcha.
that.
And then Congresswoman DeRaymer had introduced a bill. How does C4, I guess, feel about that? Do they think it's just going to get killed? Or I attended an event not too long ago, and Chair Smith said she doesn't see it going anywhere. So just curious if this is, if that's how others feel, and that's why we're already looking, I guess, at these Nexus projects.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, you know, a single elected official can introduce a bill, whether it gets the momentum to kind of get to the floor is a question. And I'm not an expert on, how law becomes law, but I know it takes a small, the stars really have to align on that. And there's been other legislature that's been, and I actually haven't read that, her bill, her draft bill language, but I think we're all just kind of feeling like there's two tolling efforts going on, one on Abernathy Bridge, and then there's regional tolling that's being talked about as well. Abernathy Bridge seems to support diversion, or the idea of diversion, a lot more than a regional toll. So I think the effort is to try and force, even if they utilize the gantry on the Itobai Bridge, utilize that in more of a regional toll scenario as opposed to just that one toll gantry being used. But, to answer your question, I'm not too familiar with where others are with regard to what is Representative Dreamer's bill, is that?
Yeah. Okay.
Good deal. We're on to communications. So anything we want to get onto the agenda for October that hasn't already been discussed?
I have a couple things.
Go ahead, Tim.
A while back, we talked about working on a fire evacuation route through the city. And I haven't seen any plans, because remember, we had a lot of traffic snarls when we got to experience everybody from south of us coming through to get to, outside the fire zones. So is that something we need to work on? Is that something emergency services needs to work on, designating certain streets and being able to control traffic devices to flow? For an example, going down Holcomb Boulevard, 2 miles took 2.5 hours by more than 50 residents in our neighborhood that said that how long it took them to get down there. That's a 2-mile walk. You could walk it faster. But that's just one of many areas. And then I think Washington Street became a nice thoroughfare along with 99 and everybody else. So that's why I need to know, do we need to work on that ourselves to start working on a route? Or is that something emergency services needs to do?
Well, so we've done a little bit of that, but the reality of that is that's, again, one of those regional problems, because that traffic that clogged up Oregon City wasn't Holcomb Boulevard residents.
No. I mean, it just was everything coming
So,
into the center of the city.
The county has been, Joe Merrick has been working on a detour route as part of their emergency management planning. So he's the county traffic engineer. He's been putting together some efforts on that. I don't recall, have you been involved with that at all?
I have not.
Okay, so haven't seen it lately, but I can definitely follow through on that and figure out what status that is and if he's willing to talk to us about it, or at least share enough so that I can talk about it.
The other one is, we're gonna do,
Check in with Dana on the traffic studies.
yeah, we
and
need to get
the-
that, that's way
And the
behind.
piggyback on the county for the speed zones, maybe just to check in with her.
Yes.
The other one's about the cities, the neighborhood associations to start identifying, we're gonna start dividing those up. do the public meetings.
Yeah, I think we've had some participation, Chris, correct?
We haven't had a meeting yet for
Okay.
Rivercrest, but
Okay. And Bruce, were you the other one that kind of had it tackled that you were gonna hit one?
I'm gonna hit one, but, I don't even know when they meet yet. I'll look and see. Normally get a flyer in the mail for, the Gaffney. There's a Gaffney Lane, I believe, or Gaffney area one, so
Okay.
I'll find out what that is and I'll hit that one.
Audrey, can we get an updated list of the official chartered neighborhood associations? So
And
we
you were
can
gonna
just start marking up the cities and.
You were gonna hit Park Place, Tim?
I already did Park
You already
Place,
did?
yeah.
Okay. And Julia, you mentioned one, or?
I
am
haven't, so
Okay.
my neighborhood doesn't have one, but I would be attending a different one.
Okay.
That brings up the question when we had one at Park Place, they were talking about doing the development next to Home Depot. Did those guys getting off the ground on that, or? They were gonna do quite a bit of stuff. They were gonna have to make, Abernathy and rework, what is that street?
Yeah, that's Washington,
Washington, yeah.
Abernathy, Redland.
Yeah, because they're gonna put in the mixed-use, retail and housing and,
Right.
in there.
So if you remember, there was an urban renewal vote on indebtedness because the city has a requirement that voters approve indebtedness, I think anything over $25,000. And so that vote did not pass. That was, the only way that that project was going to move forward was with a public-private partnership. And without the ability to issue indebtedness, it's my understanding that that developer and that project, the project is not moving forward and the developer is, I don't know if they're moving on, but they're definitely putting it on the back burner.
So that ballot measure was to do the city partnership and the infrastructure for that whole street area there then?
Right.
Okay, so
So
that was
that
turned
project
out.
wouldn't pencil without
Right,
some partnership or some urban renewal funding.
okay. When was the election? Was that June or May? I guess it was in
I
May.
think. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else with any topics for next month? All right, we're at adjournment, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you,
right.
everybody.
Thank you.
You-